College can be pricey, but if you need to go and you're not sure if you can afford it, check out these 5 tips. What's up guys, it's me, Lori. So the tips I'm going to share today are probably going to be useful here and there for just about anyone who can't afford to just pay outright for college, which is like everyone these days. But it'll be most useful for anyone who grew up like me in a lower income household with a single parent who may not have the extra funds to save up to send their kids to school. As some of you already know from some of my earlier videos, I went to a really expensive private university, NYU. My tuition was covered with a whole mixture of things from scholarships from my school and from outside, from financial aid from the federal and the state government. I worked myself, I did work study, and I got federal loans. Plus, my mom actually dipped into her retirement fund to help me a little bit with the housing situation. You can find out a little bit more about how all that worked out in this video that I'm gonna link above about how I worked throughout my college years. I promised in that video and maybe some other videos that I was gonna talk a little bit more about getting funding for college. So the following is going to be 5 tips that I got from my own experience, updated with some research that I did, and I will provide links for you guys down below if you want to read more. So my first tip is to go where you can afford to go. The good news is you don't have to go to a fancy, expensive college, especially if it's going to mean you're going to have to spend years digging yourself out of hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Yes, there are certain doors that would open up for you more easily if you went to a brand name school, but as much as some people would like to believe, the world isn't run by a bunch of Ivy Leaguers. And I'm a firm believer that it's not about what a degree can do for a person, but more what a person can do with the degree that they have. And that's a video for a whole other day. Anyway, if you know what you want to do, public schools are actually a really good alternative for certain professions. In New York, for example, you can enroll in any one of the city universities of New York and pay only thousands of dollars per year as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars per year. And you'll get a quality education. If you do well in high school, some of these colleges will actually pay you to go to them. To give you an idea, I got offered a full ride to go to the Honors College at Queens College, and they were even gonna give me a computer and some extra cash and everything. But the only reason I didn't go was because NYU also offered to cover my tuition. When I was accepted to that program was actually the first year they were doing it, and I think it's since evolved. So I looked it up and I'm including a link down below for you guys to look into it. Basically, anyone who gets in, I believe, is given a full ride to go and also still offer the computer and all that stuff. My second step is something that you probably saw coming because I am the queen of research and planning ahead, but it's to plan ahead. Colleges have a financial aid office that will either look at something called the FAFSA, which is the federal application for financial aid, or they'll have their own private, separate financial aid application. Sometimes they'll look at both. Even if you're only a sophomore or junior, you can get an early copy of those applications to sort of get an idea of what they're looking for. But basically what they want to do is find out more information about your household income and your assets to figure out what your actual ability is to pay for college. That means they're going to be looking at you or your parents' tax returns going back a couple years, so that's why I say plan ahead. If you wait till the last minute, for example, to realize that you would have been better off investing some of your savings into a mortgage and you might have been eligible for more aid, then it'll be too late. If you are not expecting to get a lot of aid, or you're not sure if your aid is going to cover your full tuition and you might be relying on private scholarships, definitely save more money than you think you need. A lot of people, including people that I knew, were forced to drop out or transfer to cheaper schools because sometimes they'll reevaluate your financial aid situation or your scholarships and reduce them as you move on in your school career. The other thing to keep in mind, which maybe you can plan in advance for, but maybe not, is that tuition at public schools is usually cheaper for local residents. So if you live in New York State, for example, or in California State and you want to go to a UC, the tuition is a lot cheaper for people who have lived in that state for at least a year. Here's a table, for example, that shows tuition is more than double for students coming from out of state than for students that are in state. My third tip is that it's okay to borrow money. When I say that, I'm not saying that you necessarily should borrow like $50,000 or $100,000 to go to school and spend your life paying it back. But you should know that there are really good government loans that are available that offer really preferential rates to students. If you need to take out loans and those federal loans are available to you, depending on how much you think you're going to make when you come out of college, it's really worth it. But as I always say, do your research. If you know that you want to go into a profession that may not necessarily pay a lot, but it's a sort of profession where the schools are really expensive, then it may not be worth it for you to borrow all the money and then, get a job that is going to make it a real struggle to pay it back. Like if you're going to be an artist or a writer, sometimes those programs can be at private colleges that are really expensive, and when you get out, you probably will make a lot less than a lot of other people with the same amount of education. I will say this though, I borrowed $24,000 around, and at 21 that seemed like a huge amount of money. But now that I look back on it, I realize that it's actually pretty manageable over the course of 20 years. So my monthly payments are less than $130, which is just like another phone bill at this point. Also, what some people may not know is that if you become a public servant, like if you teach at a public school after you get out of school, you only have to pay your loan back for 10 years and then the government forgives the rest of your loan. Once you have all your tuition costs squared away though, what trips some people up is that college costs a lot more than just tuition. It takes books, it takes supplies, it just takes general lifestyle and upkeep, transportation, and housing. In addition to the aid that I got to go to NYU, I also had to live off credit cards, which any financial advisor would tell you is a no-no. The thing that general personal finance advisors don't consider though is that when you start out with nothing, access to capital is everything, even if it's borrowed. It's kind of like an investment into your future and into your growth, and for some of us, credit cards are the only way for us to access that capital. Just remember that you have to be prepared to pay it all back. And if you are the type of person who is not that good about managing your spending, you have to be really honest with yourself and just stay away from the plastic. But if you think you can manage it and you're gonna go the credit card route, the key is to minimize the cost of borrowing. When I was in school, and even in the first few years that I was working and making a pretty low salary, it was actually pretty common to get those offers in the mail for 12 months interest-free credit cards. So what I did was apply for a couple of those, use that credit for 12 months, and when it expired, just transfer the balance over to a new credit card that also had zero interest. Even if they advertise that balance transfer as free, you should know that each time you transfer that balance, you're paying something like 2.5%. But if you're in a position where you can't pay that amount back and you're still in investment mode in your life, you do have to pay that fee and do those balance transfers, because otherwise your credit card interest rate is going to go up to something like 20% a year. I have to re-emphasize, and I can't emphasize enough though, that you really need to be the type of person who can keep your spending under control, because this is a really risky move, and though you have access to credit, you also are taking a bet that a year from now you're still going to be able to access those low interest or zero interest rate credit cards. Some pre-planning is also useful in this case. Like if your parents have good credit and they're the type of people who pay off their bills in full every month, having your name added onto their account can start building your credit from an early age. So when it comes time for you to apply for your own credit cards, or even down the line to apply for a loan to get a car or maybe buy a house, it'll be good that you've already built up your credit history. But the same goes for the flip side. If your parents have bad credit and they have a tendency to fall behind on their bills, you definitely don't want to have your name put on any of their accounts, because that could hurt your credit before you even get started. My fourth tip is do not sleep on free money. Loans are money that you need to pay to use, but there's also a lot of money out there that you don't need to pay for. There is a website that I used when I was in high school, and I just double checked to see if it was still around for you guys, and it is, that has a sort of database of something like over $3.4 billion of scholarships available for taking. If you go on the website and fill out a profile, you'll see that there's a scholarship for pretty much everything, and you don't even necessarily need a great GPA to get one. You can make a couple $1,000s for writing an essay about e-waste. You can make $50,000 for submitting a video about a science project. There are scholarships for veterans, there are scholarships for playing certain sports, reading certain books, and more. Speaking of grades though, if you think good grades are only for nerds, know this: you can get money for scoring high on your PSATs, or if you're in New York, you can even get high achievement scholarships for doing really well on your Regents exams. So if anyone ever makes fun of you for taking school too seriously, just see who's laughing when you show them that check. The military is also an option. If you enlist, you might be able to get money for school, or even to get educated in a certain field while you're in the military. I have a friend who did that, so I'm going to try to bring him on the channel at some point to tell you guys more about it. My fifth and my last tip is work. This one's obvious. If you need money, work is the surest option, and it not only gets you that paper, but it adds to your resume. So I actually explained how I juggled both an unpaid and a paid job while I was in school, and I will link that video up here. Aside from what I already told you, I also had some side hustles going, so there's other stuff to it, but I'm just not totally sure I want to talk about all that on this channel yet. I probably will tell you guys at some point. So I hope some of that helps. If you have other reasons for not going to college, that's totally cool, but if money is the only thing that's stopping you from doing it, I hope that maybe this will help you reconsider. If you're anything like I was and a lot of my friends were at age 18, if someone told you that you were going to be broke until your mid-20s, that would sound really unacceptable. To be honest, in that point in my life, I might have said that a job paying $15 an hour sounded like a way better deal than borrowing $15,000 or more to go to school. But I can tell you now in hindsight at 32 that if you know in several years that you can make much more than that $15 an hour, then it's definitely worth it to invest in that piece of paper. Something to remember now is that the economy is not always going to be good. It's not great now, but we're growing and unemployment is really low. What that means is just that money and decently paying jobs is not always going to be plentiful, and at some point when shit hits the fan, it's always going to be easier to have that piece of paper on your resume than it is to explain to someone why you don't have one. So ultimately, when it comes to deciding whether college is the right value for you, only you can do that calculation. If you guys have your own tips or any questions at all, feel free to share that below, and please subscribe. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.